Hi everyone, Zelda here. I am coming to you with a week ahead tarot reading. I have 3 different piles corresponding with 3 different crystal skull guides. You are going to pick the one that you feel most called to and use your intuition, and then you will go to the timestamp in the description and you'll skip ahead to the reading that is for you. Generally, group 1 doesn't have to skip very far. You could just keep watching, probably. So before I show you the different skulls, I want to tell you the 3 different decks that I'm going to be using. The first deck is the Reclaim Oracle deck. The second deck is the Smoke, Ash, and Embers tarot deck. Looks like that, the little dragon. And the third one is the Fuzzy Prism Oracle deck. It's the back. So 2 of them are Oracle decks, 1 of them is a tarot deck. And so each one will get a 3-card reading, and then I will give you any messages from the skull being if they have any to share. As always, I encourage you to use your sacred powers of discernment to decide if it feels like the messages are meant for you, to allow whatever is supporting you to kind of come in and to leave the rest. Yes, so without further ado, group number 1, pile number 1, this is Menuka. Menuka is a star garnet. Very hard to see in this light, kind of washes him out, but he's actually like a really deep red and has a star in the right light. Very heavy compared to kind of the size of what he looks like. Menuka. This is pile number 1. Pile number 2 is Manu. Manu is carved. Oh, I forgot to tell you the carver. Pile number 1, yours was carved by Subhash, Meena, star garnet. So Manu is a quartz with Lodolite or chlorite inclusions, carved by Leandro de Souza. Pile number 3, this is Princess Lumi. Princess Lumi is a pyrite skull. You can kind of see the raw pyrite. And I don't know her carver. Her carver is unknown to me. So that's pile number 3. Pile number 1, Menuka. Pile number 2, Manu. Pile number 3, Princess Lumi. So, whichever you are feeling called to, you can feel free. I am going to call upon, just for a moment, guides, teams, lineages. You can stay for that, or you can skip ahead to whichever reading is calling to you. If you're staying, I invite you to just take a moment and drop into your body. I am dropping into mine, finding your breath. Surrendering to the communication of spirit so that it may serve as an open channel, calling in the wisdom of my and whoever is watching's past, present, and future selves in this and every timeline, opening to the wisdoms of ancestors, beloved dead, teams, lineages. So that we may receive whatever messages are meant for us. So, if you are still here, I am guessing you're in pile number 1. I'll just move these things out of the way. So I'm going to turn your cards over and share them with you. So the first card is Breathe. Second is Jealousy. And the tarot card is the Queen of Wands. I'm noticing that I am feeling called to find my own breath in that moment. This feels like a very visual experience of the breath. And I'm noticing that with these cards together, there's this feeling of contrast happening between the Queen of Wands and this card. Like the Queen of Wands is kind of sitting relaxed, not like clinging on to that wand, but sitting with this flower in their mouth, kind of like resting. And this feels very much like a clinging on, and the other being is like leaning away. And this person, to me, doesn't look like they have much room to breathe. This feels a little bit like the message of how are you keeping your eyes on your own paper? How are you bringing yourself back to your own path, to your own lane, to your own relationship with your work in the world, your calling, and not spending too much time kind of like looking over your shoulder and seeing what other people are doing, trying to stay away from like comparison, jealousy, and even it feels like the Queen of Wands feels very tuned into personal magic and to what is actually there and resourceful to be accessed. Whereas jealousy feels very much like, even though there's like having like this person is wrapped around this other person, they're not like looking at them, they're looking away. And so we can sometimes cling on to things and be so consumed by the fear of not having them anymore that we're actually no longer enjoying that experience. And so this feels very much like a message around actually enjoying what you have and releasing some of the fear or the anxiety around what happens if that thing leaves. That can be true with people as well. We can cling so tightly to a dynamic, to a person, that it actually creates more space because people are not objects to be possessed. They are independent beings. And it feels like that is lost in the kind of like clingingness, and that there's a lot of fear in that. The breathing feels like a ventilation of like breathing out and releasing. I'm feeling this practice of like when you inhale and you feel yourself kind of like filling up with this spacious energy, and you exhale and you like release all of the things that aren't serving you, and you let go of maybe the need to control any sort of situation, because that feels like a big part. Like jealousy, envy, those things feel very rooted in like the mind and in like hanging on to things, whereas the breathing feels very much like releasing and letting go. And there does feel like this contrast actually playing between those, like they're on either side. The jealousy is on the right hand. It's going to be reversed for you, but as they're laid out, it's like breathe, Queen of Wands, and jealousy. And it feels a little like there's this tension between these two energies. And the Queen of Wands feels very much like owning and stepping into your own magic. The Queen of Wands is, the Queen is the element of water and Wands is the element of fire. And it almost feels like this like alchemical holding of these different elements that maybe feel at odds with each other, but can coexist really powerfully. And you are, your journey in this world is very much an alchemical process. You bring together the very different like nuances and perfect aspects of what you have have to offer and then bring something fully unique into the world. Does that mean that no one has ever had the idea that you've had before? Well, I mean, it could mean that, but it also could mean like, maybe the idea itself is a collective notion, and the way that you're sharing it is actually the most important piece of it. This feels like breathing and allowing yourself to settle into your own system and feel your own sense of enoughness. When we kind of cling on, there's oftentimes this fear of not being enough, of that someone else would have to like look elsewhere because we don't feel sufficient, or that someone else getting their needs met in a certain way says something about us personally of being enough, particularly because this is seeking outside validation. Now, this isn't me speaking to whatever relationship dynamics you choose, whether it's monogamous, polyamorous. I think jealousy is something we all work through. But the really important underpinning piece is that if we are constantly in fear that we have to meet all of this, or we have to do this in a certain way, we're not actually like resting and offering that fully. We're not feeling our sense of enoughness, I guess, because we're trying to get that met from someone else or from something else. And that does feel like, with the Queen of Wands, this feels like it's represented. All of the Reclaim Oracle have these very beautiful kind of like representations, but I also feel like this can be a very internal process. This doesn't feel inherently interpersonal to me, even though a lot of interpersonal things can be inter and intrapersonal at the same time. It feels very like this could be a jealousy of a certain role in the world, or a certain type of accolades, or a certain type of performance, or a certain thing perhaps that you want, like a milestone in life. And that holding on and giving a lot of that power externally is very like, has that tense energy. And this feels very much like, how do you rest where you are? Allow yourself to breathe and feel and drop into that, and really release and let go, perhaps, of the idea that you need to keep or have or attain something to be good enough. Messages from Menuka. Menuka is showing me this image of, I took Menuka to hot springs in the mountains in Colorado, where I live, and there was this really beautiful experience where we went in super, super late at night, and there was no one else there, and we could go in fully without our clothes, like fully nude, and just rest. And it was cold, and the water was very warm, and floating in the water and looking at the stars just felt like this incredible vastness of being like held and apart, and getting to witness the universe almost as an extension of self. And part of this message feels like being able to like witness yourself as a force of nature. And that part of stepping into your own magic is to really feel connected, that whatever it is you're reaching out to grasp and to attain and to have is actually something that you are already a part of, and that you can find internally. That doesn't mean you won't ever have or get the things that you want, or have the relationships that you want, or get to stay in relationship with the people that you want. It only means that stress around it, you can breathe and release that. And that breathing is one of those magical ways where we actually feel our relationship and our being a part of the world, because we inhale and we take things in, and it has this alchemization, this transmutation. We exhale and release things out, and that nourishes the trees. And, it's a way that we are a part. It's this kind of way that we are constantly interacting and in relationship with our surroundings. And so harnessing that feels also like part of tapping into the sweetness of being part of the collective. And that is your message for today, Group 1. Thank you so much. If you would like to receive any further messages or gather, I do have an event happening for the full moon in Capricorn. We're going to be meeting kind of on the tail end of that energy. It is Thursday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and you can find the link in the bio. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you next week for the week ahead. If you're still here, Group 2, you chose Manu. Let's look at your cards. Your first card is Surrender. The tarot card is the King of Wands. And Security is your Reclaim Oracle card. I feel like looking at these cards, I feel like altogether, I feel a sense of like tallness in my body, like almost like I got taller. And I see this position of having the hands over the head. And I think of surrender as like I give in or I put my hands up, but I also think of like surrendering as like spreading yourself out, even like surrendering to your own empowerment, to your bigness and your height. Surrendering to security is a very interesting juxtaposition in my mind, in particular with this quality of like reaching up that this branch, this wand also has. The King of Wands is a double elemental of fire and fire. The King of Wands feels like this kind of passionate, exalted leadership position in terms of having a lot of agency over your relationship with your creative process, with your magic in the world, with your sense of purpose, with your career. I think it's very important to discern that career doesn't always mean like what you do, like career does often mean like what you do for money. But when I'm saying that in terms of the wands specifically, it doesn't necessarily mean like your 9 to 5. It could be your vocation, your calling, your sense of purpose in the world. So if you are someone who works a 9 to 5 or works a job to sustain yourself in late stage capitalism, that's not necessarily what we're speaking about here. It feels much more connected to a sense of like your true purpose and calling, your sense of like divine connection, your soul's calling in this world, in this life. And feels almost like you are acknowledging that you have like stepped through a doorway into holding that more fully. When I see this card, it's very interesting because this dragon, this kingly dragon of wands, is kind of resting. And it does feel like knowing, being secure in your own power, in your powerfulness, and then not needing to fight for that. Like insecurity, I also see this being, and to me, like maybe they're wearing like a onesie or something, you know, you can see the kind of like, but they're very like revealed, and they're also very like taking up this space. I see it, these like rooted qualities to these plants, and also this very sacred geometry of also kind of feeling like bringing together the alchemical symbols. So this kind of like containment. I get this sense that maybe you've built something for yourself and that you're learning to trust that. Like perhaps you've started a business and it's going well, and you need to kind of realize that maybe you're not needing to do as much striving, that maybe you can rest a little and surrender to the fact that you have built something for yourself that is going to give you security. Maybe it is giving yourself some permission to reflect. If you're seeking some more security, I also wonder how you could turn to a sense of empowerment around like what are the areas where you do feel secure, and how can you rest in those places if you're not, as I know so many people are struggling right now with a sense of like financial security. This is the wand suit. So this isn't necessarily that we're talking like, of course it can translate, but I don't get the sense that we're talking even about like financial qualities of like that like pentacle even energy, but this is more like your own power, your creative flow. How can you surrender? Like maybe this is a sense of if you're feeling in your creative process and you have a day where inspiration is not like hitting you over the head, how can you like rest and be secure in your flow of ideas, in your inspiration, in the way that things ebb and flow in a very like natural way, and that you get to kind of like rest and take stock, and also know that you get to assess and make changes. But this King of Wands feels very much like acknowledging that, like acting in the way that is actually very authentic to that, and maybe inspiring others a little bit in the process, being secure in yourself and taking up space and surrendering to your kind of unique brilliance. Also gives other people the permission to take up space in that way and to do their work, so that you who can't do someone else's work and don't need to be, aren't trying to. Let's see what Manu has to share. I'm feeling this quality of like really intense emanation of energy from my third eye area. And I do notice this third eye imagery. I'm hearing surrender to what you know to be true. Surrender to what you know to be true. It's possible that someone watching this might feel like their third eye is opening a little bit more. And this feels like a sense of feeling secure in what you are seeing and trusting that insight and that intuitive awakening that you're having. Especially with this King of Wands, that energy can feel kind of like fiery and intense. This feels like leaning into that rather than putting up resistance and blockades and leaning away. I'm also seeing this like upside down crescent moon like behind my eyes when I close it. and I don't know exactly what it means. So if that's something that resonates with you, perhaps holding and looking more deeply into that, kind of like in downward facing crescent energy. Okay. Thank you so much, Group 2. I think that is your message for the week. If you are interested in receiving more messages or gathering and doing some healing around the full moon, I do have an event going on for the full moon in Capricorn called Clarity and Prosperity. The link is below in the description, and I would love to see you there. Unless I see you then, I look forward to catching back in with you all next week for the week ahead. Thanks so much. If you are here, welcome Group 3. Group 3, your choice being who called to you is Princess Lumi. And your cards are Embrace, the King of Cups, and Blame. The thing I immediately notice is this quality of like pointing the finger, and how in the Embrace, the fingers are pointing towards each other. Like it almost feels like different arms, but this Embrace feels like it's wrapped around and the fingers are pointing towards each other. And that so often blaming is an act of othering, of saying like, it's not me, it's them, right? Or it's that, and that's the fault. It's not me. And that in the Embrace, it's almost like welcoming back in the agency to be like, I take that in. How do we point the finger or invite the attention back to ourselves when we have these othering reactions? This is something that we do. You know, I know that shadow work is popularized in many ways right now. A lot of, spiritual teachings around shadow work have become more available and accessible. Shadow work in this way feels very much like this quality of how do we invite that which we project outwards and other back into ourselves and reclaim ownership of that. The King of Cups feels like an excellent archetype to be stepping into in that, because there feels like this quality of emotional agency and authority is the word that's coming to mind, but it really feels like emotional empowerment or emotional like leadership in a very like self to self kind of way. Being able to reflect on external experiences and invite that back inwards and lead in a way that feels empowered in that way, in an emotional sense, feels really like reclaiming agency over one's own life, and also is like acknowledging that when we embrace those parts of ourselves that we want to like blame or other, we actually have access to a lot more of ourselves. This feels like When blame comes up, there's often conflict at play, whether internal or external. And I do feel this desire to like, rather than, and this doesn't mean like don't take space and take care of yourself. This is just an inquiry into like, how does like leaning in or like bringing something very close and like working with it in that like heart-centered intimate way feel like it gives a little more like connective quality than being like no. um I also feel this quality of like tapping into like an unconditional quality of self-love, to be able to like, I see this being and looking into like this water dragon, right? This King of Cups looking into these kind of like wavy waters, maybe not 10-foot waves, but look at those clouds in the background. They look a little stormy. And like gazing into this water and kind of seeing the reflection, the individual fish jumping out as like a reflection of themselves, and like taking ownership over all of that and feeling like that is, on this rock that they're standing on, there are all these like gems. There are all these like gems of wisdom and being aware and a part of like all of the things, and that there's a lot of like delight and um, joy to be found in that process. Emotional maturity and the process or arc of emotional development can be incredibly rewarding. And so I also see that like this could be a relinquishing of the need to be right in the favor of like, what does it mean um, to be unburdened. That is the word, to be unburdened of the need to be right. That is feeling like when we embrace all of the mess and chaos of ourself, we can also unburden ourselves of the need to be right, the need to be perfect, the need to be infallible. This also feels like an embracing of like our true humanness in a way. We had the Queen of Wands come up in an earlier reading. The King of Cups is fire and water as well. So there is also this kind of like tension between the elements, but in a very like balanced way. And this feels a little more like external. Like I get the sense, especially with the blame, the embrace, the King of Cups, that there's going to be a like relational quality. Just to be transparent, this may be triggering, like this may be getting triggered, right? How do we see our triggers as information about where it is that we get to heal? Let's see what Princess Lumi has to share besides what she's already been sharing. So, Princess Lumi is an insectoid princess. And she was showing me an image of like a hive. And of being a part of a collective. And that in a collective oriented hive mind energy, this isn't about needing to conform, but rather in seeing the collective benefit as an extension, as an individual benefit. The collective benefit is an individual benefit. And so in a relationship, even a two-person relationship, it feels like, how could in that partnership the collective benefit of growth and of healing be an individual benefit? Even if it involves saying, hey, my bad, right? Like that's kind of, it feels like that maybe there is going to be an opportunity for taking compassionate ownership of something that was a mistake or that you'd like to improve on in the future. Yeah. That feels like Princess Lumi's share for you today. She really wanted to come on and share. So I think her information was really important for all of this message. She's a newer skull for me. And usually I wait a while before they come on readings so I can connect with them more deeply, but we have been connected. Thank you, Group 3. If you would like to connect at all and receive some energy healing, some collective reading for the full moon, I do have an event going on called Clarity and Prosperity for the kind of tail end energy of the full moon in Capricorn. It is on Thursday at 6 p.m. and you can sign up through the link in the description. Thank you so much. I really look forward to catching you next week for the week ahead tarot reading. Right now, I am primarily doing those videos since I have a lot of other things going on, but eventually I'm going to be doing, deck reviews and other messages from my guides, as well as anything else that might come up in the meantime. So if you'd like to be notified of that, you can always subscribe. Thank you so much. I will see you next week.